Growth has a way of shifting the ground beneath your feet in a way that quietly removes you from the reach of people who once felt powerful. The moment your mindset outgrew the environment that hurt you, everything changed. Their tactics stopped landing because your identity stopped depending on their approval. You weren't fighting anymore. You were advancing. That climb didn't need an announcement. It spoke through how you carried yourself. Someone who used to rely on emotional habits began relying on clarity. That alone weakened every trick meant to destabilize you. Progress became your shield, not pride, not revenge, just progress. A higher sense of self-worth made you see connections differently. You no longer gave energy to people who drained you. Conversations that once consumed hours became unnecessary. Arguments that used to keep you awake felt pointless. Your focus moved toward your future instead of your wounds. People who once intimidated you lost their place because your priorities changed. When your attention shifts to building your life, the people who tried to break you shrink mentally. Their influence fades not because they apologized, but because they no longer matter in the story you're writing. Confidence built from healing changed the way you responded to disrespect. Instead of internalizing every insult, you recognized it as a reflection of someone else's insecurity. Instead of trying to fix broken dynamics, you stepped out of them. That internal shift removed emotions from situations that once overwhelmed you. You realized your energy wasn't meant to be spent fighting battles created by people who had no intention of growing. One inner upgrade created a separation they never anticipated, and that separation became their defeat. A stronger mindset turned you into someone who chose solutions over emotional explosions. Whenever someone tried to provoke a reaction, you answered with stability. Stability is threatening to anyone who thrives on chaos. Their confusion grew because the version of you they were prepared to manipulate had disappeared. In its place stood someone who saw through motives instantly. People who rely on emotional control lose their advantage the moment their target begins thinking clearly. Your clarity became a weapon they had no defense against. Self-respect wrote the rules of engagement. You stopped explaining yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you. You stopped begging for honesty from people who were proud of hiding things. You stopped apologizing for standards that protected your peace. Those changes weren't dramatic. They were subtle shifts that came from valuing your emotional safety. Once you realized you deserved better, you no longer entertained anything that made you feel smaller. Their attempts to bring you down failed because you finally understood your own height. A different level of thinking made you unrecognizable to those who only knew the past version of you. Your silence held confidence instead of fear. Your distance came from wisdom, not avoidance. Your calmness wasn't numbness, it was discipline. People who once triggered you found no reaction to feed on. That void made them uncomfortable. Their old tools didn't work. Their usual patterns collapsed. When someone outgrows the environment that once controlled them, all the power shifts naturally. Healing gave you insight that made it impossible for old manipulation to hook you again. You started catching intentions before they turned into actions. You sensed dishonesty before the words were even finished. You felt the weight of someone's behavior long before their excuses arrived. That sensitivity wasn't weakness. It was intelligence refined through experience. People who wanted to keep playing games couldn't keep up because you weren't operating on emotion anymore. You were operating on awareness. Progress created momentum that pushed you into a different emotional reality. Life started rewarding your discipline. New opportunities replaced old disappointments. Your mindset stopped circling the same painful questions and began building answers. The transformation wasn't about outperforming anyone. It was about outgrowing the past. The farther you moved from that old version of life, the more obvious it became who was stuck. Watching you evolve forced others to confront their lack of growth, and many couldn't handle that mirror. Peace became your final advantage. Instead of fighting for closure, you created closure through your actions. Instead of demanding recognition, you let your behavior speak. People can argue with your words, but they cannot argue with your progress. Peace made you unpredictable because it meant you no longer acted from emotional instability. When someone finds peace, the world around them reveals its true colors. Anyone who wasn't meant to stay naturally removed themselves and anyone who valued you showed it through consistency. People who play dirty always assume the person they target is too slow to notice what is happening. They confuse kindness with weakness, silence with confusion, and patience with ignorance. Their confidence grows because they believe the game is theirs. What they fail to understand is that some people do their best thinking quietly. Some people see more than they speak about. Some people allow the noise to continue because they're studying the patterns, watching the motives, and waiting for the perfect moment to make a decision that cannot be undone. Letting someone believe they are winning is not weakness. It is strategy. It is choosing timing over reaction. It is choosing understanding over impulse. That patience becomes power. While the other side celebrated small victories, the person in the background was connecting dots. Every insult, every lie, every attempt to twist the story became a clue. The one who seemed passive was building clarity. The situation turned into a map where every action revealed character. This awareness made the eventual decision clean rather than emotional. Nothing was rushed. Nothing was chaotic. When someone's behavior keeps exposing their intentions, there comes a point where silence becomes the sharpest response. Letting someone think they're winning gives them the confidence to reveal everything. That is how the unexpected shift becomes possible. The most dangerous move is not anger. It is detachment. Emotional explosions give control to the wrong person. Detachment removes that power instantly. Once the quiet mind stops trying to fix what cannot be fixed, everything changes. The person who thought they were winning suddenly loses access to reactions they depended on. They can no longer provoke. They can no longer twist. They can no longer study emotional responses because none are given. Detachment creates a vacuum that forces their own behavior to echo loudly. Those echoes reveal more truth than any confrontation could. Their confidence begins to collapse under the weight of their own decisions. Sometimes the most powerful revenge is choosing yourself. Not loudly, not dramatically, simply choosing peace over chaos. Choosing silence over battles that go nowhere. Choosing to walk away with dignity instead of fighting for understanding that never arrives. The shift looks small from the outside, but it hits hard because it removes their influence completely. People who rely on emotional control panic when the person they target suddenly refuses to play the same game. That moment becomes the destruction they never saw coming. It happens with no shouting, no threats, and no dramatic scenes. It happens through a quiet decision to remove access. When someone realizes their tactics no longer work, their behavior becomes desperate. They try harder to pull reactions. They push harder to get a response. They cling to the old version of the dynamic because it made them feel powerful. The new silence exposes how powerless they truly are. Watching them fall apart under their own frustration is not about revenge. It is about clarity. Actions reveal everything when emotions exit the room. The destruction comes naturally because their behavior collapses without the reaction they relied on. The person who was once underestimated becomes untouchable. Life always exposes the truth when the mature one stops participating in the madness. Letting them believe they were winning allowed the truth to become clear. People around them began noticing inconsistencies. Observers compared the dignity of the quiet one to the chaos of the arrogant one. The contrast made the truth impossible to hide. Reputation shifts silently when someone carries themselves with strength instead of noise. Watching someone unravel while the one they targeted grows stronger is a lesson in how character destroys lies over time. The destruction is not forced. It happens naturally through comparison. There is a strange power in restraint. Holding back instead of lashing out teaches control. Control creates respect. Respect changes the entire environment. The one who stays centered slowly gains the advantage. Every calm decision becomes another crack in the plan built by the manipulator. Every boundary becomes another signal that the old dynamic is dead. They might not understand it at first, but they feel it. The shift makes them uncomfortable because they cannot predict the person they once controlled. That unpredictability becomes the weapon. It dismantles their strategy piece by piece until nothing remains. Growth becomes the final blow. When the person who is targeted starts evolving instead of breaking, the entire game resets. The manipulator expected destruction, not transformation. Watching someone grow after being mistreated forces the truth into daylight. It becomes clear who invested in healing and who invested in harm. The contrast humbles the one who believed they had won. Their strongest move was temporary. The growth of the other person becomes permanent. That growth destroys the original power imbalance. It leaves the manipulator exposed, while the other side moves forward untouched. Walking away with dignity often hits harder than any revenge. A quiet exit removes the manipulator's ability to rewrite the story. The silence exposes their insecurity. The space reveals their insignificance. The detachment becomes their downfall, because nothing hurts an insecure person more than losing the attention they used to feed on. Leaving them standing alone with the consequences of their own behavior is the destruction they feared. It forces them to realize they were never as powerful as they believed. The one trick they never expected was indifference. Nothing shifts the outcome of a situation faster than a person who finally understands their own value. Once you stepped into that understanding, everything that used to break you began losing its power. People who once felt superior started noticing that their words didn't reach you the way they used to. Their attempts to make you feel small fell flat because you stopped shrinking to fit their expectations. This quiet transformation created a gap they couldn't jump. They were still trying to control the version of you that existed months or years ago, unaware that you had already moved far beyond that emotional point. Their influence faded not because of confrontation, but because your new sense of self-worth made their opinions irrelevant. The victory wasn't explosive. It was subtle, almost invisible, yet undeniable. Every environment becomes easier to navigate once you raise your internal standards. Before growth, you tolerated behavior that drained you because you didn't believe you deserved better. After growth, the smallest sign of disrespect became enough to walk away. That shift didn't make you cold, it made you clear. Clarity saves you from repeating old mistakes disguised as new opportunities. When you started choosing your peace consistently, the world responded differently to you. Opportunities aligned, connections improved, toxic circles fell away. People who relied on your old tolerance felt threatened because your new mindset didn't give them room to operate. You didn't push them out, your standards did. Some transformations happen so quietly that even you don't realize how much you've changed until you see someone trying to treat you the way they once did. Your reaction tells the whole story. Pain used to trigger you instantly. Insults used to derail your entire day. Manipulation used to pull you in without warning. Now you respond with calm logic, or you don't respond at all. That difference is the proof of your elevation. The more grounded you became, the more childish their behavior looked. What used to control you now looks ridiculous. What used to intimidate you now looks weak. Growth makes old threats lose their shape. People who tried to outsmart you never prepared for the version of you that learned from every hurt. Experience sharpened your thinking. Reflection made you wise. Mistakes gave you insight. Instead of collapsing under pressure, you studied the situations that broke you. You examined your patterns. You understood your triggers. You learned why you allowed certain behaviors. That inner work built a foundation so solid that no manipulation can knock it down again. This is the power of elevation. It creates a version of you that sees danger before it arrives, that senses lies before they're spoken, that walks away before damage begins. Wisdom becomes your shield. The closing of that chapter wasn't loud, but it was final. You stepped into a new life without needing applause or recognition. People who once underestimated you felt the shift before they understood it. They saw someone who no longer played the invisible role, no longer chased their approval, no longer accepted crumbs. You didn't destroy them by force. You destroyed their influence by becoming someone they could no longer reach emotionally, mentally, or spiritually. And as your life began improving, the truth became clear. Winning through elevation leaves no mess behind. It leaves only distance, growth, and a peace that those who once tried to control you will never have.